Hey guys, we have news today that MicroStrategy, or Strategy, if you like to call it that, has acquired 430 Bitcoin for $51.4 million, and they are currently holding 629,376 Bitcoin, which cost them about $46.15 billion, at an average of 73,320 per Bitcoin. They are well on their way to a million. They passed that 500,000 a while ago now, and soon they will have 1 million of the 21 million Bitcoin that's ever going to be around. I don't think people realize how much of a big deal that is, that they're going to have this pretty large portion of Bitcoin. The only ones to have more than them could be these spot Bitcoin ETFs collectively, but those are going to be two major holders of Bitcoin that as the years progress, they're just going to get larger and larger. Now, as for MSTR on the chart, I would love to pick up some more at the 200 MA. This, throughout this cycle, has been a great opportunity when buying at the 200 MA, like back here and back here, and even this brief pullback in 2023. We did recently take out this low, and if the 200 MA doesn't actually hold, we may pull back a little bit more, possibly test this trend line here, this white line that it has bounced off of a few times. So I do think a buy in the low 300s for MicroStrategy would be a great entry point, and that is if you're okay with buying this late in the cycle or starting a long-term position, especially those of you that think maybe the 4-year cycle is broken, we're not going to have a severe crypto winter. I do think MicroStrategy is an okay buy in the low 300s, preferably starting with a small position and anticipating hopefully lower prices in the future. We have been getting a lot of liquidations recently. In the last 24 hours, Bitcoin has seen $579 million worth of liquidations, most of those being longs because of the pullback. Long liquidations have been close to 500 million, shorts are 81 million. The market likes to knock this leverage out, liquidate the people that are betting on certain directions, let things reset a little bit before its next move. Now, according to this article, it's trying to pinpoint a reason for Bitcoin's pullback. It could be just simply profit taking. You know, we did see a nice run to new all-time highs. I'll link this down below, but they're trying to say that, you know, Bitcoin's pulling back because of fading expectations for aggressive Fed cuts, basically, and also heightened geopolitical risks. And it did run up to 124,000 last week, started pulling back once we got PPI, which came in higher than expected, CPI. It appears that inflation is not going in the correct direction for rate cuts. However, we'll look at the Fed Watch tool in a second and point out how a few things in that article are wrong. What I would say is the main reason that we are still anticipating rate cuts, regardless of heightened inflation, basically, and not reaching the Fed's 2% target, is because of this poor job data, this revision. 258,000 fewer jobs revised down, basically. 250,000 less than initially reported, with a weaker than expected 73,000 jobs added in July. And this poor data caused Trump to fire the person that provided the data, shooting the messenger, basically. He believes they're corrupt, and he's going to put his own guy in to make sure things are not corrupt. Because that totally makes sense, right? Regardless of this inflation data that did come in hotter than expected, the market is still anticipating Fed cuts with an 83% chance of a 25 basis point cut and an almost 17% chance of leaving things current. Odds were slightly higher on Friday of a cut, 85% versus the 83 now. But this is basically where they've been for almost a whole month. If you go back an entire month, chances of a rate cut were actually much lower, a 55% chance, with a 3.5% chance of a 50 basis point cut, which this article does mention here. But this isn't completely correct. Markets shift from pricing in a half-point cut to anticipating a more modest 25 basis point cut. Just for a 50 basis point cut for September to even be showing here, you'd have to go back an entire month, back to the 18th of July, and it was still a 3.5% chance. Basically, the market was not expecting a 50 basis point cut at all. The market has been consistently expecting more likely a 25 basis point cut, and that's how it's basically been. So always make sure, you know, when you read these articles, cross-examine them, because they'll say things that are actually not true. The market was not anticipating any 50 basis point cut in any recent time. But yeah, in my opinion, mostly because of this weak job data, we are still getting cuts regardless of inflation that has kind of ticked up. And despite this massive tick up, the market is still seeing rate cuts starting in September as the most likely thing to happen. Look at this, from a 2.5% forecast, we got a 3.3% reading. Look at that massive tick up. Back to the levels we were much earlier in the year. And the previous read was revised upwards. This is getting farther and farther away to that Fed's 2% target. But despite that, the market is still anticipating cuts because of a weakening job market. The Fed is basically watching two things. They're watching inflation and they're watching job data. And while inflation has been rising, job data has been getting worse and worse. Hence the reason for still expecting cuts. And also from a geopolitical standpoint, Trump met Putin in Russia, but there was not any kind of progress made on Ukraine. He is expected to talk to Zelensky and key European leaders in Washington today. So we'll see what comes of that. Now, I did want to mention Bitcoin is still holding the 50 MA. We dipped very briefly under it. We didn't get a candle to close under. And we are attempting to still hold our 116,000. As we approach this ascending support, it's going to be important to keep holding this. If this breaks, I do think there's a chance we come down to 111 area, this next level of support / resistance. And I've also been noticing this rising wedge. This is not a bullish pattern. We do have obviously the opportunity to fill out this pattern, come higher, hit a new high, come back down, hit another higher high before, breaking. But I think we could see 128 before this sees a major pullback if this pattern plays out. I guess you could say it's a bullish pattern on the very short term, but not on the longer scale of things, not in the grand scheme of things. Because yes, we can go higher, break a new higher high, but if we follow this pattern, we are going to break it eventually and crash down. But if it fills out, we will be going higher first. I do want to talk about TeraWulf news. We do have an update with Google. Google boosted their stake. It's now $3.2 billion, allowing them to buy 32 million shares. So it's basically an additional $1.4 billion, which brings that total to $3.2 billion, hiking their stake to 14% from 8%, giving them more sway in the company. As they increase their stake over 10%, it does give them more voting rights, essentially more sway, more ability to tell these execs, tell the management what to do. This is very exciting for TeraWulf and hopefully a sign of more things to come for others. Does Microsoft start getting involved? Apple, Meta. There's a way for these massive companies to instantly get more exposure to AI without having to build out the infrastructure themselves. TeraWulf did break its cycle high. This was one thing we were watching for, a break of the cycle high to push higher. And here it is now trying to hold the psychological 10. And it just recently flashed its golden cross because of this massive move, and because of recently it was trending up on its way to a golden cross regardless. Now, do I think TeraWulf is a buy on this news? Yes, but not without a stop loss, not without a plan to exit, because we have created massive gaps here. It has run a lot. There is going to be profit taking just from this news. Since this news was announced, it has already ran about 90%. Things can't just run forever. But if you want a little piece of the hype, if you're excited and want some TeraWulf, I do think it's a good opportunity. And I do think it has potential to keep running. But there definitely is a heightened risk to the downside, if that makes sense. But anyways, what are you guys doing with TeraWulf stock? How do you feel about MicroStrategy continuing to take more and more Bitcoin away from the average consumer, making Bitcoin harder and harder to come by for an average person like me and you? But anyways, thanks as always for watching, guys. Hopefully you have a good Monday. I will see you tomorrow.